por cuestión técnica puede tardar como 1 o 2 segunditos, pero ellas están al tanto de ustedes para hacer el cambio de lámina. Y antes de que salgamos a comer, bueno, cuando toque el receso, les doy de nuevo el aviso, les voy a pedir que hagamos una foto de grupo antes de que nadie se nos vaya. Gloria, cuando quieras podemos iniciar.
El IICA le da la bienvenida a este evento y agradece su participación. Estas son algunas recomendaciones para mejorar la calidad de la videoconferencia. Habilite su micrófono solo en el momento que le den la palabra. Es importante mantenerlo en silencio cuando otra persona está hablando. Por favor, tener encendida la cámara en todo momento para que otras personas lo puedan ver. Si necesita atender algo personal, puede apagarla y encenderla al volver. Agradecemos por favor poner en silencio sus teléfonos celulares para evitar alguna interrupción en la videoconferencia. Recomendamos cuide su postura y su posición frente al computador. Para esta reunión contaremos con interpretación simultánea. Es muy importante que cuando ingrese al enlace de Zoom del idioma de su preferencia, debe hablar en ese idioma. Por ejemplo, si ingreso al enlace de español, debe hablar en español en todo momento. Al finalizar el video, les pedimos el favor de hacer silencio durante 30 segundos. Una vez finalizado ese tiempo, el moderador o conductor puede iniciar la reunión. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of this 3-day workshop on animal health in North America. And I'm really thrilled to major topic. There's tremendous concern on African swine fever in the Caribbean right now. And industries are concerned in the north, in Mexico, US, and Canada in particular. So it's timely. There's a lot of interest in this issue with our member states. I'm Dr. Jean-Charles Lavallée. I'm the country representative for ICA in Canada. I'm also the secretary for Poste Norte. Poste Norte is a network of scientists from the north, Canada, US, and Mexico, and on animal health with Caribbean. We also work on plant health, we work on gene banks, we work on climate change, soils and water. And so I'm here to welcome you to Mexico City, in the room, online. We've had tremendous interest in terms of participation. We maxed out our Zoom registrations. Over 500 people registered for the 3 days. So we're thrilled that there's so much interest. In the room, I see there's some new faces. So if you need a copy of the agenda, you can scan the QR code. And if you need the Zoom, you can scan the other QR code so that you can follow the interpretation on your phone. Online, you have a button, a globe, usually, or if you look under Mass or More, you will find an option to choose interpretation, and you can choose English or Spanish if you haven't done so. Just a reminder, we don't introduce speakers. We try to maximize time and focus on the presentations and discussion. And so all the bios are in the chat. And then we use the chat. So build your questions for the Q&A session. There are no Q&As after each speaker. There's a Q&A session in the morning and a second session in the afternoon. So build up those Q&A questions that you have right away as they come to you in the chat, and we will use them here in the room in Mexico City. I'd like to let you know that we have a task force on animal health under Poste Norte. This is led by INIFAP and Dr. Susana Flores. And we also have another member with us in the room, Aruna from TFIA. He's our Canadian rep. And Roxanne Matroni that you saw yesterday, she's our US rep on the task force. I'd like to invite the lead of the task force, Dr. Susana Flores, to say a few words of welcome in Spanish.
Hola, buenos días. Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí nuevamente, a las nuevas caras.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for coming back to us. It's a pleasure to have you here. To those of you that are connected online, once again, thank you as well for connecting. We would love to have all of you here, but it was rather complicated in the logistics, but we are glad to see you have interest in our topics. As John Charles was saying, today we have a workshop dedicated to the porcine, um, to the swine flu, which is very important for global impact, specifically in our case on North America. And as it was mentioned by the doctor, we're going to have a Q&A sessions at the end of a block of presentations, at the end of the morning and at the end of the afternoon. So to make sure that you provide your questions in the chat so that we can ask them our speakers at the end of the session. Then we're going to have the analysis of the main points of interest and the areas of opportunities that we may have to be able to get these collaborations and contributions between the different specialists and between the different countries that are here in the room and in connected. So without any further, let me go back to our secretary, John Charles, so that we can get started with the presentations.
So in the morning, we will have 4 sessions before the lunch break. And some will be virtual and some will be on site here in Mexico City. And we're lucky to have the presence of a team from the USDA, from the Dominican Republic and the US. They will be our first speakers. Although the agenda, you will see at least 2 speakers. Only one will be giving the talk, Dr. Yusaira Castillo. Over to you. Coming up to the podium.
Muy buenos días a todos y muchas gracias por la invitación. Mi nombre es Yusaira Castillo y
Good
pertenezco...
morning, everyone, and thank you for this invitation. My name is Josaira Castillo, and I am part of the group of incident commands provided by USDA APHIS for North America and Canada. So let's get started. Next slide, please. Well, to start with, we would like to discuss summary of what's been the impact and for Dominican Republic, and not only Dominican Republic, but the entire island, and the experience that we've had to this disease throughout the history of our countries. And then we will go through what's been our experience in this new implementation in 2021, and we will be sharing the initiatives that we have started so that we can help approach the control of this disease in the country. Next slide. To understand more specifically what is or what it means to have African swine flu in the Española island, it's important to understand the place we are coming from and what's been for us and what has been meant to have these outbreaks in 2 occasions already. Since the moment it was still originally detected, the very first time, the African swine flu in Dominican Republic was in 1978. And in July of 1978, initially, it was confirmed presence in the entire island, throughout the entire Hispaniola island, when we were able to find samples in Haiti in December of that same year. Once we were able to confirm that the disease was present in the entire island, and we were able to confirm as well that even if we haven't done before, that the disease was confirmed in the entire island, we was already had already spread to the entire island, and the efforts not to eradicate it or to control it were a little bit disorganized. At the time, all the veterinarians and the authorities already knew about the disease, were informed about the disease. The disease had already been spread to the entire island. Next slide. Initially, we considered that the outbreak of African swine flu had reached the island Hispaniola through after a flight, waste in a flight coming from Spain. That hypothesis has changed now, thanks to science that we have available right now. And although Dominican Republic, after a year of fighting against the disease and not being able how do I say this? In Dominican Republic, we have an expression that's, to hit it on the head, on the nail, right? It's the disease was too far ahead from the efforts to eradicate it or control it. So at the end of 79, the country decided that it's going to eradicate the disease by calling the animals. Now, the most of the outbreaks were controlled and eliminated. I would like to say successfully by 1979. By 1980, we were able to reintroduce the primary swines and primary pigs. At that time, the Dominican Republic was able to say, I'm free, but we are an island, right? And the efforts to eradicate on the other side of the island in Haiti, have a shared island. And Haiti efforts were a little bit slower than what the Dominican Republic was doing. The next slide. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So just last year, thanks to our friends from Plum Island and Dr. Forca, whom it's also talking to us on these issues, we were able to determine that the strand that arrived to the Hispaniola Island in 1980, in fact, was coming, or it's a brother of the strand from the Sardinia Caligari, and we have that confirmation. Several years later, but we have that confirmation. Next slide. And so the process in Haiti was a little bit uphill. It took Haiti about 2 years, after the presence of the disease in the island was confirmed, to start the eradication process. Why? Because the Haitian people is a little bit more remote and they're more rural. So the pig population was completely disseminated in very small farms all throughout the entire territory. So to be able to have some sort of calling in Haiti, they had to create first an awareness campaign for the population, a mass population campaign. This means that the international organizations that decided that we have to take control of the situation in Haiti, they had to first educate the population and explain why they were being calling the pig population, and then they were able to take on the second stage, which was compensation and the elimination of the animals. And for why this time they use, and it's important for you to keep in mind that for this entire process, both in Dominican Republic as well as Haiti, the people in charge of starting the process were not so much the official animal health authorities, but they also included the military authorities as well. So the process was violent, to say the least, in some occasions, right? So by April 28th of 82, Haiti, 2 years after the Dominican Republic had completely eliminated the disease, then Haiti is able to say they are free of African swine flu. This process left some had some leftover effect in the population of both countries. That means that today, even today in 2021, when we once again detected the disease in our island, many of the people that went through the process of this calling in the 80s are still alive, and they still remember, or they were still involved in pig farming, or they still have pigs in their backyards, and or they simply participated in one way or another in the process. So this means that the process was painful for the population of both countries, but it was successful at the end because we were able to completely eradicate the disease from our island. But it was also expensive for the governments at that time, of course, not compared to what it will cost today to to eradicate it, but it was a process that was long, that was difficult, that was impactful, and we were able to eliminate in both countries. We were able to call about 1 million pigs in each of the two countries in the island. Next slide, please. The 2021 detection. Next slide, please. As you all know, those of us working with ASF, we know that African swine flu comes specifically from genotype 2, specifically comes from 2007, since 2007, doing it,
Industrias en países que, como China, que
making its incursion in big industries in big countries like China, where we say that have a more organized industry than in Dominican Republic. But even for China, it's been very difficult to be able to let's say, to be able to face the disease and create an effective program to be able to eradicate it. So much so that they have opted for control instead of complete eradication. And so until when it was detected in July 2021, Dominican Republic and Haiti, which means the entire island of the Hispaniola, we will have a very normal life. We're going to say that, we were not so worried about implementing methods. They were not really prepared for the detection or one new detection or outbreak of the African swine flu in their territory. So much so that it is believed so that because of the problems we had during the pandemic, the initial reintroduction of the virus did not happen in July, but it happened all the way to in April of that same year, and that the samples that were processed had already been had already been waiting for a while when they were taken, and they were taken to the labs in the United States, and we were able to confirm the presence of the disease. Next slide. According to the sequencing, the genetic sequencing studies on the disease, we were able to determine that when we started the first sequencing of the virus in the island, the virus had been introduced 3 to 12 months before the first sequencing had taken place. We were able to develop two genetic groups, Group 1 and Group 2 were called, and Dominican Republic, Group 1 was predominant, and Group 2 has not been sequenced in Dominican Republic yet. Say, I don't know, up to 5 months after the lateral transmission was detected in the country. Now, until December of 2023, up to December of 2023, we have sequenced close to 29 different sequencing of the genome of the virus that is present in the island right now. In the information that the sequencing was able to provide is that apparently the virus came in once to Dominican Republic, which means that there's not been any new introductions of the virus, and that the transmission as from that point on has been lateral transmission. Now, it is, of course, we understand that epidemiology studies to confirm this type of theory have been sort of, let me see, how do I say this? They haven't been the most effective studies as we wanted to have or planned to have. This is because I would like to say that, let me see, the slowness in some of the procedures and the amount of red tape that has, delayed the decision making throughout this entire process since we were identified the disease in 2001. So we are now working with multiple clusters with the disease, and the more significant ones are the Altagracia, the Romana, the Independencia, Boruca, Alto Mayor, and the Jabón, and Maria Trinidad Sanchez. These are names that you have no idea what they mean, but if I had a map, I can show you the regions. I will show you the regions in a map at some point. The next slide, please. Okay, so when the virus was reintroduced in Dominican Republic, at that time the industry was not the best, but the industry was moving forward, and we were legally organized, and we are implementing technology, so much so that it's considered that the big industry in Dominican Republic was creating and providing to the government close to 58,000 direct employment tax-paying jobs, which may sound very little, but it's very big for a country the size of the Dominican Republic. Initially, there were close to 2,000, sorry, not 2,000, 2 million animals with about 60,000 wombs. For a few months later, for 2022, it was considered that the number of wombs in the Dominican Republic was reduced to half, and the number of animals which were still available in the industrialized farms and in backyard farming was close to 230,000 units. And now it's important to understand, next slide please, that for Dominican Republic, the biggest number of pig farmers are not organized. Now, close to 13,000 pig farmers are backyard farmers or are free range pigs, so to speak, right? And that this means that although the swine production is very important for the economy, we have to understand that most of these pig farmers are opportunity farmers, are farmers that have pigs because they are basically a bank. There's a piggy bank for the home, right? They're the emergency fund, not because they are growing animals to send them regularly, or not because they provide any sort of amount or income to the local economy. Next slide, please. This little map here underneath are the cases that were detected of African swine flu in the Dominican Republic between July and December of 2021. In total was 778 cases or mini outbreaks, whatever you want to call them. And although when the disease was confirmed, we started some conversations, very similar conversations to the ones that were held in the past. And it's important to note that one thing. Dominican Republic, right from the beginning, said that they were not going to call animals anymore. No, it was not going to be a possibility anymore. And so it was a government decision, and we're going to say APHIS or USDA could not influence in any way against that, because they have an autonomy and their sovereignty. So this means that at the time that we had these conversations, when the disease was already spreading throughout the entire Dominican Republic territory, and in fact, there was conversations during the first quarter of 2022 that the disease was now being called endemic, which means that when the activities started to try to understand the activity of the disease had been spreading around through the population for a while and reached the entire territory. Still, with this, I need to understand, and I have to admit, I, as a Dominican national, that the response from the Dominican administration was very slow, and that absolutely did not help at all. Next slide. And something that in part it makes us proud, and something that in part we are sad about, that by the time that the African swine flu was in the Dominican Republic, APHIS was already in the ground. We had already has started getting involved since 2019, a program to strengthen diagnostic services in Dominican Republic. That's why APHIS already had presence and samples that should have been sent a long time to the lab, but due to the pandemic, it made it difficult to send samples, mass samples, to labs in the United States. So still, then now that the problem was identified and settled in, we had to focus on doing something about it. And the response from APHIS was based on 4 parts that were subdivided into 7 other parts. The first thing was the surveillance. All right, both the design and the implementation of surveillance, something that we are still struggling with. And then after that, biocontainment and biosecurity, which this means avoid this African swine flu to move to other countries in the region, especially territories like North America and our neighboring countries. We definitely don't want this to reach any country, of course, but we understand that that pig farming, it's a very big industry in Brazil, or in the United States, or in Canada. Oh, Mexico as well, too. So the next thing we try to focus on was on our diagnostics capacity. Basically, what we did was increase as much as possible the capacity of the national labs in Dominican Republic so that they could do their sampling up to 1,000 or 1,500 samples a day, which basically was very difficult due to limitations on infrastructure, due to limitations in red tape and bureaucracy, and because the veterinarian services in Dominican Republic didn't have enough staff to be able to provide the diagnostics capacity that was required. So it's useless to have the machinery available if we have nobody to work with the machines. So it was an entire remodeling and modernizing process, the install capacity, but also to train the technicians that were going to work and respond to this request of services. And that's where we go into training. There was not only for staff, but also for the response with field veterinarians as well, which is regrettable that being a country that had difficulties with the disease in the past, none of the universities had a specific plan for training on rare diseases within their case studies. So this means that we had to start by training everybody from zero, because even the recently graduated veterinarians didn't have absolutely no idea of how to deal with a disease like this. When we talk about what are the biggest challenges, so we can say that there are 4. 4 were the biggest challenges. Dominican Republic has regulations, right? They have regulations. We're not going to say that there's nothing. And in one way or another, this regulation could have helped the work of the international institutions on the ground, although to make sure that the regulation is applied or enforced, that's the part that is difficult. Now, the second problem was that the competent veterinarian authority did not have, or it doesn't have, any budget autonomy, and it doesn't have any legal authority. The competent authority has absolutely no authority to go to a farmer and say, look, you cannot work like this because that's going to be dangerous. You have to do X, Y, or Z. No, they have absolutely no leverage. And then the lack of funds from the Dominican Republic to work against this PPA. It's sad, but it's our reality. The third issue was the fourth. And the fourth and most important issue is the lack of infrastructure and organization in the pig farming industry. This is a political issue with a very ingrown tradition, and the organizations of farmers don't get along, and they don't work together, and they don't organize each other, and one doesn't agree what the other one is doing. So you have to start from zero every time you go to a meeting with any association of pig farmers. Next slide, please. Now, In between all of these situations, we had some success stories. Yes, of course, we had some success, such as the understanding of how the disease spreads, which has allowed us to reduce considerably the number of cases per year. We also have training and implementation of the pool sampling. We have tried to change and sort of self self-implement new sampling methods that are faster, that are more comfortable, and that are able to reduce the contamination, possibility of contamination of the samples, so that the samples get damaged in shipping. We are also working with the increasing the diagnosing capacity in the central lab, veterinarian lab. The compensation continues, and we are now more regulated and is subject to new rules, and it's a little bit more strict. But Dominicans are famous for finding loopholes and everything, and now we have found ways to get out of the system that was implemented. But we're getting there.
También estamos trabajando
We
ya
are
de manera
also working very actively in the active surveillance. It's not that there hasn't been active surveillance previously, but now we have put a brigade for the active search of cases. And the truth is that this has resulted in a very positive manner. Next one, please. The next group or block of achievements that we have had up to now. The illness continues on in the Española. It has not been eliminated. We still have it. We still have the greatest achievement that we have, let's say, is that we have been able to achieve. And well, also right now, thanks to that, or part of that is due to the fact that we have had the canine binomials, in which at the airports, at the main airports of the Dominican Republic, the canine are trained to find meat products, because we Dominicans are famous for taking food where we go to. So that is something that is endemic. We are very creative at the moment of packaging food that we should not be carrying to other countries. Also, one of the great achievements is having developed the first manual for the management of international waste at the Dominican Republic. Up to this moment, the Dominican Republic did not have a specific regulation for the management of international waste, which is something that is a great problem. We have also been able to have some of the swine producers to have left the pork production and have turned their farms into other type of productions, to farming or poultry, or and having other types of maybe goats and sheep. We wanted to show very comparatively here the difference between from the moment that we implemented all these systems that I have just mentioned, and between those 2 years, between 2022 and 2023, the difference of cases, number of cases between 2022 and 2023. Currently, we might say that one of the problems that we are still facing, and that we feel that numbers have not really reduced furthermore, is basically the control of movement of the animals. And the system for the control of movement of live animals is a problem, both by the government as well by the institutions that are working on it, because the control of movement is only used, and the employees that work for the control of movement have a schedule, and they don't want to work at night shift. So from 6 o'clock in the afternoon, the employees pick up and they leave, and the majority of the transport of live animals is done in the early morning and late night. For matters that we all know, we're not we're veterinarian doctors. We know because there's a tremendous heat in our regions, So it's a problem in which we are currently working on, but we're doing it little by little, okay? Next one. This is the program of active surveillance that we began in September 2023. And currently, to the month of April, we had sampled 37,470 animals. All these animals are backyard animals. I would like to say this. The first level of surveillance, the active surveillance they're only working on backyard. The farms, the established farms, they have another program of sampling every 21 days in which the samples are sent directly to the labs. But the brigades, for search cases, they are only working on backyard animals. For example, these are on the left. We have the cases that have taken place, that have occurred already this year. And what we have in 2024, that is 96. And out of those 96 cases, 13 have been detected in farms, backyard farms, through active surveillance. In other words, these farms never had any type of symptomology. They didn't have any accusation or anything like that. There was no type of alarm for this to take an official veterinarian doctor or anything like that. They were acknowledged as positives in active surveillance in farms without any apparent symptomology. Next one, please. The current challenges that we have, retos, challenges that we have right now, there are two parts. The first part is, unfortunately, the command of incidents system is from the government of the Dominican Republic to work, and the response has not been completely operational. Why? Because of the lack of, they didn't hire the experts that were required, the technician experts that they should have hired. And it became sort of like a bureaucratic meeting of bureaucracy, in where we go and we say everything is okay. We just pat ourselves on the shoulders and we say everything is okay. So the next thing would be the assignment of funds from the Dominican Republic government to be able to aim this to the control program and the eradication program, the sustainability of the diagnostic system, and the problem once again for the control of movement. Apart from that, well, we still have a system for specific sanctions. We need one that really operates for the illegality, for the illegal movement, for the control of illegal movement or sacrifice of animals in plants. We have a mini challenge also in the part of the biosecurity of the slaughterhouses, and the feeding with the waste at the backyard, in the backyard cases. Next one, please. Thanks to the dynamic of the illness and what we have studied up to this moment, well, we have faced the Procinorte opportunities for this year, and we decided through the Autonomous University of Santo Domingo to begin studying the dynamic of risks of the waste feeding in the eastern side, because when we went to several farms to depopulate them, we found some barrels about this size put right on the place where the farm so we found these barrels right on the edge of the farm, and it was full of waste. Those waste obviously came from bars, restaurants, and hotels of the eastern part of Punta Cana. But according to the authorities and the government, it is supposed that these barrels should be approximately 300 kilometers distant, but we don't know how they got there. That's what we're going to investigate. Next one. Apart from it all, we have a campaign, an education campaign. The first one is aimed at the Dominicans that travel to please don't carry pigs because the pigs don't fly. This is a very illustrative campaign for us, and we have we did a reboot for that. I present to you Pestino. Pestino is going to make his debut next week in a campaign that is aimed at the university specifically, to the faculties of education, and to everybody who has the possibility of traveling. Pestino is destined to show the population that the PPA they can travel whether they want it or not. With their pork chops, with their salami, the Dominican salami has a toxic relationship with a salami, but it is incredible. So Pestino is going to be there working to show us that the swine fever travels, the swine flu travels whether we want it or not. Then, in conclusion, I would like to leave you with a key message, with key messages, and it's that we don't see at this moment, according to the country conditions, a change in the approach or the work that we have been doing. But nevertheless, we're going to continue on working with the objective, fundamental objective, that is aimed at all the job that we have been doing since 2021, starting in 2019. And it is to ensure that we have the treatment for the reduction that is almost possible, but that the PPA does not reach your countries. That is a focus, that is a target that we have, and for which we thank you for being for allowing us to be here today. Thank you very much.
Great job, Dr. Castillo. I really enjoyed it. I think everyone also enjoyed the colorful statements about Dominican behavior. I think that led to some humor and better appreciation for the situation in your country. Well done. From a Pro Norte standpoint, you saw one of the projects that we're funding. We also ICA is working on the ground in the country that with APHIS. But Pro Norte works with USDA ARS, so the Agriculture Research Service. They're a member of the task force. And we've been able, thanks to them, thanks to their funding, support research projects. You saw the issues that Dr. Castillo raised in terms of diagnostics in particular. So we are strengthening and supporting research on diagnostics and training in the Caribbean, all over, from Trinidad to St. Kitts to St. Lucia, Dominican Republic, and even in Mexico, we're working with Senacica, we're working with INIFAP, we're working in Ecuador on classical swine fever. And so we're working with UC Davis and Ohio State. There's a project in Brazil. We're looking at potentially Puerto Rico. So there's a lot going on in the region to strengthen the region in terms of readiness and diagnostics capacity in labs. It's also the theme of the next presentation. You'll see in the agenda, there are 2 speakers. This will be online, not in person. And so we have the CFIA who will be speaking about novel diagnostics tools. And we have Dr. Kalhari Gunwin Mordene, apologies for my pronunciation, in Canada, who will take the charge. Over to you.
Thank you. I believe you can see my screen. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Kalhari, and I'm a research scientist at the National Center for Foreign Animal Disease, Canadian Food Inspection Agency. I work with Aruna, and we have conducted numerous studies in the course of the past 5 years, I would say, and generated lots of data about the novel diagnostic tools that are useful for our region and also for the rest of the world in terms of early AFib detection. So I'm sharing some of that work today. First of all, a brief introduction to CFIA here. We are located in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, kind of in the middle of nowhere, but we are doing a lot of service to our country and the region as well as the world. CFIA has a network of 13 reference labs, as well as research labs across Canada. And the NCFAD is the National Reference Laboratory for Foreign and Emerging Animal Diseases. It's located at Canadian Science Centre for Human and Animal Health under the umbrella of One Health. And our goal is prevention, detection, control, and reporting of foreign animal diseases, zoonotic infections, and emerging diseases. Within our facility, we have CL2, CL3, CL3 Ag, and CL4 laboratories. And we are a BOA reference laboratory for African swine fever, classical swine fever, highly pathogenic and low-path avian influenza, foot and mouth disease, as well as FAO reference center for foot and mouth disease and zoonotic and emerging pathogens. At the NCFAD, we are multiple units working together. We have the avian diseases unit, mammalian, vesicular diseases, special path, pox viruses, and serology unit. And these units look after multiple viruses, and I belong to the mammalian diseases unit, which we call MDU. And we also have genomics unit that looks after all of these units in terms of genomics. We have reagents development unit, animal care unit, and a QA unit that takes care of our QA system. And under the NCFAD, we have the Canadian Animal Health Surveillance Network, which we call CASN, that provides the surveillance service for Canada for all these foreign animal viruses. Within our diagnostic services and research, these are the various viruses that we take care of. So I belong to mammalian diseases unit, and we have the largest number of viruses under our on our plate, I would say, including classical swine fever and African swine fever. Why ASF is so important for us? I mean, it is, I don't even have to explain. We have been discussing this so far. For Canada, we are the third largest pork exporter in the world, and we do network with all these other countries in terms of pork supply, pig supply. So having ASF is going to be a huge economic impact no matter what. So we have to prevent it. And in that case, why the early detection of ASF so important, especially the laboratory diagnosis? So this is just a simple example we always take in describing this. When you consider a group of pigs and getting exposed to the three major pathogens that we consider at this time, the ASF, CSF, and FMD, which we obviously cannot differentiate in a herd when they're sick. Compared to CSF and FMD, you can see within the matter of 2 to 4 weeks, the contagiousness of the African swine fever virus is relatively low compared to CSF and FMD that will spread like wildfire within the matter of 2 weeks. So in that case, we can detecting ASF as early as possible will definitely help in prevention and control of its spread. So that's why the laboratory diagnosis is so vital. And when we talk about Canada's ASF surveillance activities, CanSpot ASF is our campaign currently active and running, and we are a huge part of CanSpot ASF, the NCFAD. It's an enhanced surveillance method or an effort to protect the swine population by the earliest detection so that we can quickly contain ASF if detected. And it's a risk-based detection system right now of certain diagnostic cases when it's requested by a veterinarian or a pathologist. And we also test risk-based early detection of condemned carcasses from abattoirs. And these testings are conducted at approved laboratories, which is NCFAD and other CASN laboratory network labs. And on top of the testing which is going on in the laboratories, Canada has its awareness and education of the swine producers and the general public to educate them on identifying the earliest signs of ASF, as well as methods to prevent its entry into the country. So we do need better surveillance tools. ASF is clinically, you cannot distinguish it from other general clinical signs of other diseases, swine diseases. So laboratory diagnosis is critical. And in terms of VOA recommendations, the sample types that VOA recommends are individual sample types, which are mainly limited to whole blood, lymph nodes, spleens, and tonsils. That's coming from dead animals. That these are the recommended samples that we have to use for molecular diagnostics. And then for serological diagnostics, serum. However, when you think about surveillance efforts in a large-scale swine industry, like in our region, these are such labor-intensive, expensive, and impractical sample types, although they are the gold standard. So for surveillance as well as outbreak situations, we do have to look at alternative sample types that provide us ease and efficacy of sample collection, least amount of animal handling, industry feasibility, collectively representing animal herd health, as well as sensitivity and specificity in detection. So in that case, through our work, we have identified several alternative sample types for ASF surveillance, which I would like to group them into two categories: group sample types, such as oral fluids and processing fluids, and then the individual sample types that we identified very easy to collect, such as superficial lymph nodes and meat exudates. So the rest of the presentation, I'll be sharing these experiments that we conducted with the generous funding coming from US and Canada, especially the industry and Canadian Food Inspection Agency, for us to identify these sample types as suitable alternative sample types. First, oral fluids as a group sample type. So oral fluids is a mixture of saliva and oral mucosal transudate that enters the buccal mucosa from the capillaries. And it's easy to collect by hanging a cotton rope in a pig pen for pigs to chew for about 30 minutes. And they voluntarily play with it and chew it and generate the oral fluids passively through that process. And we just compress the rope and collect the sample into a tube. Right now, oral fluids are used in the industry for a large number of disease diagnosis and surveillance. So we have looked at it for the ASF point of view. In our facility, this is how we collect oral fluids for our studies, using the Tego oral fluid collection kit, which comes as a cotton rope and a collection tube with a plastic bag. And we just squeeze the wet or the chewed rope through a gate of an animal cubicle, and then easily squeeze it out into a tube. So we looked at a study, we conducted a study, an extended study collaboratively with Plum Island Animal Disease Center as soon as I joined the unit. And during that study, what we mainly looked at was the capability of using oral fluids for the earliest detection of African swine fever in a commercial standard pig pen with 20 to 25 pigs within the pen, and when during the lowest prevalence of the disease in the pen. So there we used two viruses. We used ASF Georgia 2007 one as the highly virulent virus, and then at Plum Island, ASF Malta as the moderately virulent virus. And we conducted two studies each to see how early can we detect ASF in a pen when one animal is infected there. And then we published, I'm pretty sure you have read our paper already. The experimental design of the study was the group consisted of 20 to 25 pigs. And out of that 20 to 25 pigs, we picked one pig out, called it a cedar pig, and we infected that pig with ASF, either ASF Georgia or ASF Malta. And then we introduced that infected pig, which was intramuscularly infected. He was introduced back into the pen and he spent time with the other pigs. Other pigs were contact animals for that pig. And then they eventually got sick from the cedar pig. And during that time, we collected oral fluids and other individual samples such as whole blood and swabs. And then we studied the clinical disease progression. And at the end, when the animals reached endpoints, we further collected samples. We conducted necropsies likewise. And we did look at their clinical disease progression in terms of scoring as well as rectal temperatures. And then those samples that we collected, we sent them through the regular diagnostic workflow where we did nucleic acid extractions with the MagMax kit. And then we did ZAC assay, and then we analyzed our data. So here, first I'm sharing the first ASF Georgia's 2 studies that we conducted at NCFAD. I know it's a lot, but I'll summarize for you. The first 2 graphs you're seeing here are showing the clinical disease progressions in the animals. And then the second 2 graphs are showing how the ASF genomic material was detected in oral fluids compared to individual blood samples. So first, if you see here, the red square is showing the cedar pig. So that shows the rectal temperature of the cedar pig. And you can see in both experiments, the cedar pig was showing normal temperature until about 2 days. And then from the 3rd day on, its rectal temperature is increasing. And then within a matter of days, within 5 to 6 days, the cedar pig is crashing and is reaching endpoint. So during that time, if you look at the blue line, which is the average temperature of the contact pigs in the pen, those pigs are normal. And the orange star is the cedar pig's clinical condition. So cedar pig is looking normal until about 4 days in the first experiment. However, it's rapidly declining over the next 2 days, and then it is reaching its endpoint. And during that time, the other pigs in the pen just looked normal. They were still not really sick. And during that first week, you can see the cedar pig is found dead. So there is 1 dead pig in the pen. But if you go into the second 2 graphs, you can see the red star shows the African swine fever viral genomic detection in oral fluids. So oral fluids will detect as early as 3 to 5 days from the date of cedar pig was infected. And at that time, none of these blue squares are there. That means none of the other contact pigs are still viremic. So there is plenty of time of the first detection until the contact pigs become viremic. So it is a very early detection. And we did see the same pattern in our second set of experiments conducted in Plum Island with ASF Malta, which is a moderately virulent strain. And here the only difference is the cedar pig takes a little longer. It doesn't crash as early as Georgia strain. The cedar pig takes about 6 to 10 days to reach its endpoint. It's a slower progression of disease, but compared to that, the detection in oral fluids comes as early as 3 days. Although at pretty weak levels, the initial detection, you can see the detection continues without any interruption. You can see it's still detecting even if the cedar pig is dead in the pen. Other pigs have picked up the virus and it's contributing to the growth. So we were able to detect ASF genome in oral fluids 3 to 5 days at least, 3 to 5 days post-introduction of the infected pig. And that was about 2 to 3 days before finding that cedar pig dead in the pen. And at this initial time of detection, pen prevalence of ASF was at its lowest. And oral fluid detection remained 100% after its first detection. So if you've detected once, it's there. It doesn't disappear even though the initially infected pig is dead. The virus is there in the pen. And then viral load in the oral fluid was relatively low in whole blood, obviously. So you have to be cautious when interpreting negative oral fluid results. But if you're using these high, very like real-time PCR methods, it is definitely a detection. So if it's negative, you have to be cautious, but a positive detection is positive. And what we are recommending is combining oral fluid detection with other surveillance strategies so that you can use it for confirmation later. And we have conducted a field evaluation in Vietnam, just finished it last year, and our publication is in preparation. What we can say right now is it is promising, and it's very similar to what we saw in our laboratory study. So thank you for SHIC for funding us for that large-scale field study. And then moving on to processing fluids, which is also a very interesting sample type. A passive sample type that generates through a normal industry, routine industry practice called piglet processing, which is castration and tail docking. So we collected samples into bags, testicles and tails, and then this sample type with time generated processing fluids. And this is a National Pork Board funded project for us. And with this study, what we wanted to show was oral fluids may not be feasible in all kinds of situations, such as breeding herds or suckling piglets. Processing fluid is a serosanguinous fluid that generates from tissues collected during piglet processing. So it is a passive sample type that anyway gets collected, and it is being tested for other pathogens right now. So why not use it for ASF detection? So we conducted 2 studies with 40 pigs in each study, 40 uncastrated males. We used 2 moderately virulent ASFV strains here because we understood that moderately to lower virulent strains of ASFV could be sneaky and spread among a herd before detecting later on. So that was our intention of using moderately virulent strains. And then we infected pigs oronasally in the natural route, and then we collected processing fluids for pigs daily up to about 11 days. And then we started looking at the processing fluids for the ASFV genomic detection. And we detected the genome starting as early as 3 to 4 days following infection. And we also tried to pool the tissues, processing fluids, and see how early can we detect and how much can we detect without losing the ability to detect in a pooled sample. Because in reality, these are processing fluids are large pools of testicles and tails together, not really individual. So we did identify that you can pool up to about 100 pigs without losing the ability to detect ASFV genome at 4 dpi. And we also looked at the antibodies. Yes, we can detect antibodies starting from 9 to 10 dpi by ELISA in processing fluids. So this data will be out soon. Then the other sample type that's very useful, especially for dead pig screening, is domestic and wild dead pigs. Is something that we think is these superficial lymph nodes, because they are more superficially located. You don't need to do a full postmortem to expose them. And they are also critical for early detection, especially in dead wild and other dead pigs in a farm. So in dead pig surveillance, the most suitable sample we identified was superficial inguinal lymph nodes because of their location. It's easy to palpate, even in these are obviously positive later on samples that from animals that are definitely clinically sick, but superficial inguinal lymph nodes are easy to palpate and identify even in a normal animal before all these hemorrhages and edema coming into play. And because of its site, there's less contamination, there's less bleeding, so we don't see a lot of site contamination with it. And people can be trained relatively easily to collect them. We looked at the correlation of the detection, ASF detection in superficial inguinal lymph nodes compared to that of spleens. And we did see 100% sensitivity and specificity in the superficial inguinal lymph nodes with the spleen counterpart. So it is a great sample type that can be easily recommended to collect during dead pig screening. And the other sample type that we were really interested was meat exudates. And yes, another passively collected sample type. So we collected meat pieces in sealable plastic bags, froze them at -20 overnight, and then thawed them. And this generates a large volume, a very good considerable volume of meat juice that can be used for various downstream tests. And we did look at real-time PCR detection in meat exudate compared to whole blood, and there was very high, strong positive correlation. And also meat exudate can be used for ELISA. And we also saw a highly positive correlation between serum and meat exudate antibody detections. And this is our paper that describes about the majority of the work there. So in summary, these alternative sample types are promising for surveillance: oral fluids, processing fluids, superficial inguinal lymph nodes, meat exudates, and other the sample types that I discussed here. And on top of these, we have looked at other samples such as skin biopsies, ear notches, meat swabs, and nasal wipes. And the data with these sample types will be coming soon. And what I can say is they are as promising as the other sample types that I discussed here. The next part of my presentation focuses on portable field deployable assays, or point of care tests that are very useful for early detection of ASF. Under that, first I'll talk about portable thermocyclers, which are battery powered. There are several examples out there in the market right now. Tetracore is doing great. Franklin has Biomeme. Biomeme is producing Franklin instrument. There's Indical, Pocket, Solace. There are different portable methods, portable instruments that are available right now. One of the amazing features of them is lyophilized reagents and field deployable extraction methods that are very useful for in field where you don't have these laboratory equipment available. So we did test the Franklin instrument by Biomeme. And here it actually comes with a syringe-based nucleic acid extraction method, which is the M3. And you can test up to 9 samples. Results come in less than 60 minutes. It's like a cell phone interface, iPhone basically. And you can get the PCR and GPS metadata directly uploads to a cloud. And then you can do the real-time monitoring there. So what we did was, on top of what is there, we transferred our diagnostic assay, which is Tignon assay, as a duplex assay with beta-actin without losing any sensitivity or specificity. So we did see positive correlation between the assay extraction and PCR compared to our MagMax extraction and CFX. So it can be easily transferred to the field deployable method. And the other important part is Aruna and the team went to Vietnam and evaluated the true portability. This was the time when Tang was in our group. And they tested the instrument in ASF suspected farms in Vietnam. And it was highly sensitive and specific, and then it was validated to be used in field conditions. And we do appreciate Dr. Fan here, who is our collaborator in Vietnam, and you can read our papers about this study. And then something I'm briefly talking about is there are these other portable molecular assays, such as the LAMP assay, RPA, and CRISPR-Cas12a systems that are in development and being used for various other method developments out there. The advantage of these portable assays is definitely they're highly sensitive and specific, but obviously the instruments are relatively high cost. I don't know how feasible it is for ASF affected countries to really purchase them and use them in their field situations. And they definitely need some technical help because you have to do some extraction, some pipetting, and PCR. So that they are useful for outbreak investigation, testing of sick and dead animals, and also for quarantining animals in smaller scale laboratory testing sites. There is a good future for them if the cost can be brought down in a better way. And then the other most user-friendly and kind of the cheapest method available right now out there for us is the antibody-based lateral flow assays for ASFV antigen testing. These are definitely cheap, easy, and quick with high specificity, but the sensitivity could be pretty low compared to the molecular counterparts, which is a real-time PCR. You can't compare it, it's apples to oranges, but it is what it is, but it gives pretty good screening capacity. So we did look at PenCheck assay as the lateral flow assay. And this is what we found there. With the PenCheck, at least, the limit of detection was 10 to the power 7.8 TCID50 per mil virus, which is a pretty high titer. The CT had to be like below 23 to be detected by the PenCheck with 100% specificity. And it detected almost all pigs showing acute clinical signs such as fever and depression. It does detect antigen in tissues collected from pigs succumb to ASFV. So it can be used for herd level testing, for screening, but unfortunately have to be confirmed with other real molecular assays for confirmation on individual animal basis. So here is a few more findings of the lateral flow assays. They are not the most sensitive, but they are most sensitive during the clinical phase of an ASF infection. And there was a paper that described that LFAs are not fit for field diagnosis of wild boar carcasses due to clotting, and decay could outweigh the benefit of higher viral loads. And you can find more information in our paper here. So field deployable assays, definitely the portable thermocyclers, smaller scale, very easy to use, but the cost comes in the way. Simple nucleic acid extraction methods are great and field deployable. We don't need centrifuges or electricity for them. And then there are isothermal methods that also takes away the need for thermocycling, such as LAMP assay. And then the lateral flow assays, obviously, I just described, are great for antigen and antibody detection as well. So that's a summary. And all of this work wouldn't be possible if not for all the funding that we received. A huge thank you to Canadian Food Inspection Agency. For the past several years, we've been given ASF dedicated funding to conduct all these massive, very laborious and very extensive research projects. So thank you so much for that. And USDA, US National Pork Board and Swine Health Information Center have been huge pillars of our research success with their generous funding. USDA has been there for us from the beginning, Plum Island. And thank you to Dr. Arun Ambagala, the captain of our ship, all the members, current and past members, and then the NCFAD, Dr. Sean Babier, Johannes, Kathleen, Charles. We have the genomics unit and pathology, animal care units, and all these collaborators that have been with us from the beginning. Thank you so much to all of you. And yeah, these are some pictures of us. This is the team that's been doing all the work, diagnostics and research together. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kahari. I'm sure there is a lot of questions and I can see lots of opportunities for collaboration. So just please stay in line so for the session of Q&A at the end of this early session. Switching to Spanish, ahora vamos a dar la bienvenida a nuestra siguiente speaker.
We would like to welcome our next speaker now, Dr. Julieta Sandra from Minifab, whom will talk to us about the project that she is doing right now. Good morning, everybody. For those of you connected online, it's a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for the invitation to this forum. And I'm so pleased to be able to share with all of you what we are doing at the INIFAB and this research project on this disease, such an important disease for us and worldwide. This project was presented in the summons of 2023 by Porcinorte, which was supported. And the title is the development of capacities and with the generation of reagents for serology and samples. And it started in 2023, December of 2023, and we're going to show you the first results that we've gotten. Well, as we know, for Mexico and everybody in the world, this is an important is importance because of the impact it can generate, right? In Mexico, and in Mexico, the alarm is raised due to the outbreak in Dominican Republic because the disease had stayed mostly in Africa and maybe one or a few cases in Europe. So in 2021, we see, as the doctor mentioned before, the cases we had in Dominican Republic in Haiti in 2021. And based on this, for Mexico, it becomes a huge problem. And we have to start some activities both on surveillance as well as development. In the part of surveillance, some of the activities that NACICA has done has been already introduced to be prepared for any alarm. And in matters of investigation development, INIFAB as part of the institutions involved in this research, we are looking to generate technology that will benefit the development of and defense of Mexico. And with that in mind, we are participating and we see this map from 2023. We are able to see what is the distribution. In green, we see the countries that have been reported as free of this disease. And we see that in America, well, it's an alarm for everybody in America because we have no cases up to today, no clinical cases. The part of suspicious conditions are in yellow, and the part of confirmed presence, it's red. And it's a big number of countries that have been affected by this. Next slide, please. Another item and risk that we have as a country is the amount of trade we have with China. We know that in China, the last outbreak that was mentioned in 2018 was in 2018, and the level of trade that we have, it exposes us to a severe risk. That's why it's so important for us to start generating some diagnostic systems and support the surveillance of this disease in Mexico. And that's where we establish a collaboration with the classic porcine fever and African swine fever center in Spain with a group of experts from Dr. Fernando Rodriguez and with Dr. Juliana Gangles. And from them, we established contact with Dr. Aruna, whom is here in this session as well, as a counterpart for this project as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so we at INIFAP, we have about 10 to 12 to 10 to 15 years working with biotechnology tools to be able to generate diagnostic systems and what is called new generation vaccines. We have been working throughout these years with different diseases affecting the pig farming and with satisfactory results. This allowed us to precisely have a proposal like this for this project. Next slide, please. In such a way that the general objective is to set the basis to develop diagnostics tools and techniques that are necessary for an early identification of the African swine flu and be able to apply them in different labs with the level 2 of biosecurity in Mexico. This with the use of technology, biotechnology tools through recombining protein measures. Next slide, please. The specific objectives that we have is to first, generate two recombining proteins that have been considered to be highly antigenic so that they can be assessed in their genesis in a lab in Spain and then develop ELISA diagnostics tools like a screening test that can be done in a lab with security level 2, and then afterwards confirm this development with a reference panel that is used worldwide. Next slide, please. And for this kind of work, we decided to start working with a reference strand, Georgia 2017. This due to the relationship and the information that we have with the task group with LIRTA in Spain, we decided to work with this strand for the development that we did here in Mexico. We know that this virus, it's a RNA virus, and that it's a DNA virus, and it's been reported to have, from 150 to 200 proteins, viral proteins. So we decided to work with two of the structural proteins this virus has and that have been reported to be highly antigenic. And the protein, the P72 and P30, and one that is in the shell and one in the internal membrane of the virus. Next slide, please. Okay, so with this protein, structural protein, we have noticed that the protein P30, it's a 194 amino acid protein strand that is highly immunogenic, and it has been reported in the presence of antibodies starting 3 to 6 days after the infection, as well as the P72 protein, which is a conservation protein, the structural, well, capside of 646 amino acids, and that is involved in the absorption of the virus. Next slide, please. So what's next? Well, our first experience to work with this material was in Spain, in IRTA's lab, as I mentioned before. And what we did was we started cloning 5 structural proteins for this virus. To be able to learn how to manage them, we designed specific bonds, and we were able to obtain very satisfactory results in the cloning that we did for all 5 proteins. Although for this project, we decided to only work with 2, which is P30, like I said before, and P72. Next slide, please. The first thing we did when we decided to work with this strand as a reference from Georgia of 2017 was to create a phylogenetic tree to understand how conserved is this protein. That's one. And two is how related is it to the sequencing that has been reported in America in the previous years. Also, we located in this analysis the reports that have been found of sequencing from the strands from China to also determine how related are they. And we were able to find that with genotype 2, which is what they belong to, as the doctor mentioned before, the most of the strands circulating in the previous years are part of in Haiti and Dominican Republic, as well as in Europe. We were able to determine that with this sequencing of the Georgia strand of 2017, we had 100% of identity confirmation with the genotype sequencing type 2. And with genotype sequencing type 1, we had 91.54, and with other genotype was a 97.83. What does this mean? It means that we can work with this reference sequencing, Georgia 2007, so that we can do our recombining protein and start doing our diagnostics. As we can see in that triangles there, you see the strands that were reported in America that were they're in red, the letters in red, and we have in genotype 1 and the isolations reported in China that are the diamond in blue. And this is for protein 72, which means that the sequencing of protein 72, which means that this is a protein that is being conserved and we can work with it. Next slide, please. The same analysis we did for protein 30 and for the sequencing of protein 30 and determining that yes, it stays in conservation and had 100% of identification with 9 of the sequencing reported for genotype 2. And genotype 1 is a 97% identity. And based on this, we were able to determine that we were going to be able to work with this sequencing, and we went to the next step. Next slide, please. For us, working in the development of technology tools, biotechnology tools, which we work with, such as the development of recombining proteins, it's important to have the analysis of these proteins so that we can know that they are good candidates that can be worked with and in the future can generate a very good response. For that, we created this type of analysis, the sequence for protein 72. Well, protein 72, it's a very big protein. It's a 646 amino acid chain that for our expression system that we have with E. coli, for example, we couldn't obtain it completely in such a way. Therefore, we only selected a fragment of this protein of 254 amino acids. This is the analysis that we introduce here, where we are able to see one of the very important points, the percentage of antigenicity that it has, the antigenetic index that is introduced in the pink chart there. All the peaks we see in the highest level there is an indication of the degree of antigenicity this fragment of the protein has. Also, within this fragment, we find in this analysis, 10 antigenic determinations that in most of them, given the probability of surface, they tell us that they are exposed. And that is a very good antigen to develop these diagnostics tools. Next slide, please. The same analysis done for protein 30. Protein 30, we were able to have the full expression because it's a smaller protein. And there is only 174 amino acids long. That really it can be used in our expression systems, which also had the antigenicity characteristics with a high index of antigenicity, probability of high surface probability with the presence of seven antigens, seven antigenic determinants that are exposed in this protein. Next slide, please. Another important point that we consider here is the determination of the acids, the glycosylation areas that these proteins can have. This is important because And right now, there are other expressions. That is one of the objectives to compare with the expression systems they have in the Aruna lab. And it is different from the adenovirus that we're working with, which is the E. coli. And we observed that for these two proteins, and there were only one site for glycosylation, that for the development of ELISA testing and antigenicity serological testing is not very redundant, the part of glycosylated sites, although it's important if we wanted to use it for one vaccine.
Experiencias de producción de proteínas que son no glicosiladas y que hemos tenido muy buena respuesta con otros virus en el área de nuestra investigación de enfermedades virales de cerdos. La que sigue, por favor. Y bueno, pues finalmente la idea de este proyecto es, paralelamente al desarrollo de nuestras pruebas de ELISA, de nuestras proteínas antigénicas, es desarrollar el bioproceso de producción y las condiciones estandarizadas para el escalamiento semi-industrial de estas proteínas a través de la transferencia de tecnología para que a futuro nosotros, que en este momento no tenemos la enfermedad, pero sí podemos generar este desarrollo, puedan ser transferidos y apoyar para la vigilancia, igual en un sistema diagnóstico para otros países. Y nosotros mismos, pues, tener este sistema para una detección oportuna de si es que se llegara a presentar, que esperemos no lo tengamos que utilizar, pero sí es importante pues estar prevenidos y tener estas herramientas diagnósticas, como comentaba la doctora, para tener un diagnóstico oportuno y a poder aplicar en un sistema de vigilancia. Para esto nosotros este desarrollo lo tenemos adaptado en una plataforma que podemos hacer estos escalamientos el escalamiento de estas proteínas en esta plataforma muy barata, con mayor rendimiento y a menor costo. Que esta es una de las
very cheap channel. This is a very an advantage that we would have to do in this development because the production of many of the products, many of the drugs, the cost of production in Mexico, it has been demonstrated that they have a reduction of 42% in those costs compared to, for example, with the United States. This is that Mexico is much cheaper to produce this type of products than in our case. We are developing this platform, and we are working with national biological producers to be able to adapt it and to have this system optimal to be able to precisely do that scaling. The next slide, please. As a conclusion, well, with this, I would like to tell you that to this day, the project began in September 23. We have a little more than 6 months working with this. To this day, we have already the recombining proteins with which are going to be validated in the Dr. Luna's lab, who is our collaborator in this project, so that we can validate precisely the biogenicity, and to go on to the development of the ELISAs. These proteins that we have already got them ready for the delivery, probably for next week for their validation, are also going to be sent to Spain to the Center of Reference of African swine fever with a work group that I mentioned, so that we can also do the validation over there. And well, finally, though we can say that the proteins that are generated based on this sequence of Georgia 2007, apart from being highly preserved, they are good candidates to be able to develop these diagnostic systems of ELISA, so for ASF. And the most important thing is that we are developing to make them useful in a lab at level 2 here in Mexico. And the condition of the proteins also. And in this part, we are advancing in the development of this project. The next slide, please. Mainly, the appreciation to Procinorte, because if it had not been for the financing that we obtained in this summon of 2023, we would have not been able to begin with this activities in the development of the diagnostic systems for this illness that for Mexico is, and for America, it is a very great problem. Let's hope that it doesn't come, but at least we can contribute with this information and with these tools, probably for other countries. My appreciation also to Dr. Aruna, who is our counterpart in the project. He is going to help us in the validation of these proteins. Dr. Lilian in the group of the Center of Reference of African swine fever in Spain is also going to support us for the validation of these proteins. Dr. Fernandez Rodriguez, who is part of the collaboration group of Spain. Then here in Mexico, well, that we are working with Dr. Ivan Sanchez Betancourt as our collaborator from the university, and Dr. Jose Luis Ceriteño, who along with me are researchers. We are the technical responsible or accountable for this project. Thank you. The next one. Well, our working group that finally, directly or indirectly, participates in this project within the lab. And well, this is what I wanted to comment. The work is advancing, and let's hope that in the next meeting that we have, we will have more advanced results that we will be able to share with you. The next presentation, Dr. Jose Luis is going to present to us the more technical advancement of this project. And well, with that, thank you very much for your attention. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Sandra. Very interesting. I love to see this example of cooperation that is the objective, final objective of Procinorte, to bring the experts together and to have them work from different agencies, different countries to be able to generate these projects of a linkage. To before we continue, and this is an announcement. We have changed the door. We're not going to go through the side door. We're going to be using the main door that is the door at the back to come in and out of the environment so as to make a better movement here in the room. And we have the last presentation for this morning before lunch. And that's with Dr. Jose Luis Ceriteño from INELAB. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much for the invitation for us. As it was well mentioned by Dr. Sandra, it is an honor to have been taken into account for the development and the proposal of these recombining antigens that we hope and we have the confidence that they will be the first development for the prevention of African swine fever here in Mexico. So as mentioned by Dr. Susana, this is the last presentation. It's not a very long presentation so that we can go in and rest, have lunch very soon. As an introduction, well, the African swine fever, as it had been mentioned by the previous researchers, is an illness, a viral illness, a highly contagious of wild and domestic hogs or pigs, whose biological agent is a virus of the type of the Carotididae of the astavirus. It is a DNA double chain linear virus that contains approximately 160 to 194 bases, base pairs. It is a very complex virus. As you know, it has approximately 200 viral proteins, of which 68 are structural, and it has more than 100 non-structural proteins. This makes it a very virus that is very difficult to work at a worldwide level. And the clearest example of this is that currently there is not an efficient vaccine that can prevent or control the illness. That is why the timely diagnosis of this illness is vitally important, not only for Mexico, but also for other countries. The next one, please. Within the clinical signages that we can find for this illness, we have, well, we can see the development of hemorrhages and organs, and we can also observe the development of hemorrhage at skin level and necrosis, and also presence of violent nasal secretions and very foamy. These signs are fatal for the animal, so therefore the mortality rate when the outbreak comes out is very high. That is why the relevance of the control of this illness. The next one, please. What happens in Africa? Well, in Africa, the boar is the animal that the Aquarians are the ones that transmit the illness, but in adult age they are only bearers of the illness till the day of their death. The tick is a the middleman that can transmit the illness in the different stages, like in sexual stages. But nevertheless, in Europe and Asia, the boars, the wild boars that belong to the wildlife, are the ones that maintain and disseminate the illness to the domestic pigs. The transmission of this illness, why does it happen? Because of the lack of biosecurity within the farms, where the wild animals come in contact with domestic animals. And the next one, please. Well, the World Health Animal Health Organization makes continuous reports of the outbreaks that exist or that remain active. The last report that we have just consulted corresponds to the report number 51, reported in May 2024, in which we can observe that Europe currently has active outbreaks, both in domestic pigs as well as in wild populations. This, in the case of domestic, it is thousands, and therefore the losses associated to the illness are very large. In the case of America, fortunately, at this moment, we don't have any active cases, but nevertheless, the one that's next, please. We do have, as it was commented by the previous researchers, the alert, because in 2021, there is an outbreak that took place in Dominican Republic and Haiti. This outbreak is a threat both for the Americas as well as for Mexico. So there is an alert and there is a concern on behalf of organizations throughout the world for the possible arrival of the illness to national territory. So therefore, we had the proposal of this research project that was precisely the generation of recombining antigens for the prevention of the illness. Next one, please. Therefore, the justification of our job, and as mentioned by Dr. Sandra, is that due to the pending threat that there is because of the presence of ASF in countries like Haiti and Dominican Republic, is that we need to generate early detection systems for Mexico, that we might be able to be ready in view of any event that might take place. Next one, please. And the objective of our work is precisely to produce recombining proteins of the virus of the African swine fever as candidates for the development of a diagnostic sampling for timely diagnostic sample tests for the detection of the illness. This because our group has been working for more than a decade for recombining proteins that both for the development of vaccines as well as for diagnostic systems for different viral systems that are endemic to the region. We have successful cases, like for example, the development of a vaccine for the prevention of the blue eye illness of the pigs, which is a illness that is only present in Mexico. But we have also developed some recombining antigens so that we can see diagnostic systems like the ELISA that have allowed us, in our case, to give information regarding the current situation of some of the illnesses, important illnesses that affect the pigs, like, for example, like the porcine epidemic diarrhea, which last year we published an article in which, for the first time, we have evidence in the presence of antibodies in populations of pigs that come to the corral and that are here in Mexico. And these are data that previously we didn't have. With this experience, the next one, please. Let me show you the results that we have had. As Dr. Sandra said it, in less than 6 months of work, that we have been able to carry out very important efforts to be able to have results that are effective, giving us the opportunity that was given by Porcinorte. And here I can show you the expansion of the genes. In the panel A, we can see the amplification of the gene that has the opening for the P30 protein based on the synthetic plasmids that were generated in Spain. And let me tell you that here I am only showing you the result in an electrophorensis of this, but nevertheless, these genes were injected with several modifications that we did to the genes so that it might adapt to the efficient cloning in our plasmid of expression. One of those strategies was the elimination of the methionine, so as not to have the presence of methionine or that or data that at least in humans is something that is not allowed to the production of recombining a protein with the origin of humans with the other proteins. This is something that we have eliminated also, as well as some amino acids that might provide some problems at the moment of production of the recombining protein. Like as it could be, for example, some amino acids that are hydrophobic or some sections of the protein that do not contain CTFs that are significant for an antigenic response. From the panel A, we can also show you the amplification that we had in a gradient of temperatures for the EMGN of the protein P72 based on the synthetic plasmids that were generated in Spain. That was for the panel B. And here we have the vectors of expression that we used for the working group. These vectors of expression belong to the Thermo Fisher house. They are known as PET Sumo because they gave it a Sumo label to the opening a gap of the recombining the protein. This PET Sumo allow the levels of the dissolution of the protein, and it has seen in some of the reports that it elevates the levels of expression of the recombining protein. And also to tell you that these vectors are regulated under a series of the peron lac. And this means that they produce a repressing protein that until the inductor is introduced, which in this case are the analogs of the lactose. This strategy is mentioned because it is important. And here we have these are the strategies that we have chosen uh, for a future production at bioreactor level. We, along with other recombining proteins, we have had the experience of overexpressing at the level of bioreactor reactors at a cost that is much less than the one that is produced in labs and using half an LB. We have changed the media, sorry. We have changed it for an M9 media that uses as the inductor the lactose, but that we have focused on the induction with pulses of lactose to different concentrations in a minimum essential media that reduces the cost of production at a semi-industrial level. So we have thought about this strategy so that in the future, this protein, recombining protein, it might be used in the production, in a large production and greater production, that they might be feasible of scaling, and that they might supply in a given moment the need to produce in great quantities. So not only for Mexico, but also for other parts of the world, maybe. And so as we can see here, we can see in the panel A, the amplification of the gene coming from the vectors of expression of the cloned areas of the open area of the P30 protein in the panel A that corresponds to two candidates of two plasmids that already had this cloned gene. And in the panel B, the result also of two plasmids that contained the cloned isum of the P72 in the vector of expression PETSUM. The next one, please. Nevertheless, the cloning of these clones of expression, due to the fact that they don't contain sites for enzymes of restriction that might direct or redirection of the clone gene, we have cloned it through the extremes of free adenines that are inserted by the polymerase in a conventional PCR. So due to this strategy of cloning, it is necessary for us to identify that the genes have been cloned in phase with a lector or reader of expression so that they can assimilate the protein adequately. This is a strategy that we have done through the use of olives that were designed and it is inserted in the region of the Etsumo label in an olive that is a product of the clone, in this case, recombining the proteins. And finding an amplification of the expected base pairs, it means that our clone was a clone, that our gene was cloned according to the base of expression that they are adequate for the reproduction of these recombining proteins. In the panel A, we can see these expected genes of 128 base pairs for protein the P30, and then the 178 for the P72, which would correspond to the recombining protein plus the labeling. Once we have identified that our plasmids are cloned in phase with inserts, then we sent out a sequencing, produced a sequencing, and we got what we expected, that the genes were efficiently inserted in these readers of expression. The next one, please. So, therefore, we started with a transformation of a strain of expression. In this case, we use a strain BL21, which is a biosafe strain for the reproduction of a recombining protein. Here I show you some of the stages that we have to do for the production of these recombining, and part of the evidence that we want to show, so that you can see our transformations in which the controls correspond to what is expected, and we have obtained several colonies that are candidates for the overexpression of the proteins. The next one, please. And here I am showing you the results of the experiments in which we have done this overexpression and induction of these recombining proteins. We can observe in panel A in concomitancy expression, the control that corresponds to the cells that have been transformed with empty vectors, and in which we do not obtain strains of overexpression, and that is what we use as the control of reference. A positive control that corresponds to a recombining protein that we produced a few years back in the lab. It is a protein, a pig map, which is a protein that is endogenous of the pig, and that we are using it to develop systems for diagnosis of animal well-being. So that's another line of research, but it is our protein of reference, and we know that this protein is overexpressed, and we can see that the band of expression is visible at 27 kilodaltons, 37 kilodaltons. That expression P72, we saw that at least in 4 strains that we selected for the overexpression, we can see this band at the site that we expected, that is overexpressed in these harvesting of bacteria. This was confirmed by Western blot. This Western blot that is demonstrated in panel B is a Western blot where we use monoclonal antibodies of enzyme. So they identify the histamines and our recombining proteins, which is also the strategy that we use for the purification through affinity chromatography. So we can see that although it has been very much discussed, the identification of recombining proteins, that we can observe that the controls ensure us that that what we are identifying is what we are expecting. In the negative control, we can see that there is no recognition for any proteins of histidina in the cells that we are using as systems of expression, as well as the positive control, where you can see a specific identification in the 4 colonies that were selected that contain the expected signal for this recombining protein. It is worthwhile to mention that we continue on working so that we can improve these Western blocks, because we can see if there is an identification of some proteins that very shortly will correspond to the degradation of it. The next slide, please. Here I'm showing you also the sub-expression that we had for the protein P30. In this case, we expected a protein of a lower molecular weight of approximately 33 kilodaltons, but nevertheless, for some reason, we are identifying it also at 40 kilodaltons. We are currently working to identify what happened in this process of expression. Because the sequence that plasmid contains and is in phase with the vector of infection is with a cloned cell, and it is in line with all the cell. But nevertheless, according to our experience, it is not the first time that we obtain molecular proteins of higher weight, and when they are sent, we can identify some modifications that have taken place in the protein that not necessarily affect the function of this. Next one, please. Within the strategies that we follow, to obtain the highest amount of recombining proteins coming from the proteins of expression is the formation and the extraction of bodies of inclusion. In spite of the fact that many research entities select the strategy of avoiding the bodies of inclusion, in our working group, we have observed that the majority or more than 90% of the recombining protein is going to go to these type of bodies of inclusion. And for us, it has been a better strategy to go for the recovery of these bodies of inclusion, not to avoid their formation, and then to use strategies of solubility of the protein so that we can recover the greatest amount of antigen that is possible. Here we can see both in the panel A as well as in the panel B that all the protein of almost all of the protein it goes to the creation of bodies of inclusion. And how do we do this strategy? Well, we break down the cell through mechanical ways, and we separate the soluble from the non-soluble. We can see that the soluble phase, which is SSF, contains has very little protein expressed, and when we have the phase that is insoluble, so that is a FC a panel is where we have the greatest amount of expressed protein. That's why we go through the strategy of recovering this bodies of inclusion, and we are using different techniques for a good and adequate solubility of it. The next one, please. And these are the results of the chromatography by affinity of metallic immobilized metals. Where we go through the strategy of the presence of anti-sigma. These results are very recent. They have been produced less than a month ago. We are still working on to deliver the genes in a more adequate way, and we hope that we can observe our body of inclusion. That is the one on the panel A in the attention of Kumasi, the part that says CI, and the bodies of inclusion that we obtain in reality come out with a high percentage, very high percentage of purity. We can see that it is only evidence in the presence of one single band, but nevertheless, we have gone through a chromatography of lab protein so as to obtain more than 90% of the purity in the protein that we are eventually going to characterize. Here we can see in NP, which is a phase of non-stuck, and the part of L, which is a cleansed parts of the column, as well as the dilutions from E1 to E5, where we obtain through the use of imavasor the dilution of the protein through one single step to the chromatography of affinity to the expected weight, which is 42 kilodaltons, and for the protein the P72. At this moment, I'm not going to show you the results of affinity of P30 because they have just been produced. We have not had the time to demonstrate the gens, but we already have the P30 protein ready to be sent. And finally, the yielding of this process is 230 micrograms for every 100 milliliters of culture expressed in LV. And so this is a very good cleansing, very good yielding, and these are optimum conditions so that we can begin with the development of the services. Next one, please. Conclusions. With this, the conclusions of our job, of this job that is just been 6 months into since we began with it, in which we have had some technical difficulties also, as well as some budgetary difficulties, but nevertheless, we have been able to make a very big effort, thanks to Dr. Sandra, to the students, like in the case of the engineer Lucero, which is president and masters, who is the one that is doing everything that is this part, technical part, for the obtention of her degree, and that are really the results of our students, and as well as Dr. Rocio, who is in a postdoctoral stage with us and that has participated actively in the training and the obtention of these results. So we have produced very efficiently 2 systems of bacterial expression for the P30 and P72 protein through synthetic genes that were brought from Spain. The recombining proteins, in our case, have put together bodies of inclusion that we have solubilized and made insistently pelletized, and whose yielding is approximately 230 micrograms per every 100 liters of expressed culture. And the next one, please. And finally, I would like to thank Procinorte for the support that has been given to us for the execution of this project, for trusting in us. And we have made this commitment of having the proteins, the recombining proteins in time and shape, in spite of the difficulties and problems that we have faced. But nevertheless, here we have the recombinants with all the evidence, and to think in INIFAP, which is our Institute for Research, as well as our director who has facilitated who has been able to facilitate to us all the requirements that are necessary for the execution of this job, as well as the working group that we have put together. On my part, that would be all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Ceriteño. I feel like I also need to be losing some kilo daltones. Great presentation, a bit technical maybe for some of the audience, but well appreciated. I've got 3 sets of questions. If we could get a mic in the room.
Yeah.
Okay. And the first set of questions are for the Dominican Republic. And I'm going to go online first, take the questions from the chat, and we'll go to the room. So for Dr. Castillo, the mic, please. 2 questions for her and then 1 for Dr. Crendall. So one question is about the differences between, some people wanted online some clarity, backyard versus industry. If you could provide a better picture in terms of the number of cases. And then there's another question, are there any indicators of low virulent strains circulating in the DR?
Could you repeat the second one?
Are there any indications of low virulent strains circulating in the Dominican Republic?
And the other
Okay. Do you want me to do it in
Please.
English or
And
Spanish?
como quieras.
Okay. So regarding the first question, you know, the cases in commercial producers, most of the cases they have been so far in backyard producers. And that's, you know, and I wanted to add that, you know, the surveillance is basically passive surveillance. So this relies in the reporting of cases by producers. So there were some large farms that had cases. I will say not that many. But we did have to compensate, you know, APHIS took over the compensation for farmers affected by African swine fever in 2022. And you know, we have compensated really large farms, you know, like over 2,000 animals, which was a huge expense. But the last large farm that we have compensated was over a year ago. And, you know, the clinical signs will really depend on how much mortality we see, will really depend on how fast the cases are reported to us. These large farms tend to report the cases really fast. So we haven't seen much mortality in the large farms in the last 2 years. For the backyard producers, yes, we see, you know, some mortality, maybe not as much mortality as we have seen before. We don't think it's an attenuated strain of African swine fever, but this is what we are seeing right now. Shusaira mentioned that we are also doing a active surveillance for African swine fever. We did find cases, and we do find cases, not as many. And we see animals that, you know, are positive and do not have any clinical signs. You know, maybe they are in the process of, you know, getting sick. But most of the surveillance, again, is passive surveillance on small producers.
And since you have the mic, Dr. Crendall, do you want to expand on APHIS's engagement and large
Yeah.
investment in the country?
So yeah, yeah, it's a really good question because we have been there for over 2 years. At first, we arrived there as a request of the Dominican Republic to deal with the situation. Jusaira has mentioned, how they have dealt with the disease in the past. And the decision was made to have a unified incident command for eradication first of African swine fever, with many agreements signed with the Dominican government. So we have our own incident command. They have their own incident command. We supported many parts of the control of the African swine fever there, including we fully support the lab, and we have supported the lab from the beginning, and that includes the presence of technicians coming from our lab in BSL, 1 or 2 technicians every 3 weeks for a 3-week period, and all the equipment. We calculated that's around $36 million. Equipment only is like around $5 million. We pay for compensation of producers around $14 million. US dollars, and unfortunately, since the response to the disease is not a full response that will really involve the evaluating and assessing the perifocal area, virus keeps circulating. So we consider that, is unfortunately, it's not really a good way of investing the money doing the compensation. We have supported also programs that are with our collaborators, like FAO, a program related to biosecurity that is over $4 million, improving the biosecurity and doing all these evaluations in farms. We have supported also a program through another U.S. government agency, USAID, for livelihoods, trying to convince the farmers to have a different production system, changing pigs for goats and sheep, and that was maybe around another $4 million. And we have with OIRSA, that is our most successful program, that includes the canine units and the incinerators, and that program will remain for several years, but so far that program has been around $9 million. So it's a lot of money that the U.S. is investing on that, and we see that we can really reduce the prevalence, but we might need to do something else to address the threat of African swine fever. So, thank you.
Thank you. On the contrary, I've got 3 more questions in the chat, but I'm going to go to the USDA in the room for the next question.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, because I was thinking more or less the same that Dr. Sylvia Crandall mentioned it, and that is based in the Dr. Jusaira presentation. It looks, and that I feel that we need to let them totally clear about that. The participation of the governments of US, Canada, and close now, Mexico. Tomorrow we will have a meeting with the Mexican officials from CPA to develop the plan of the mutual collaboration with the Dominican Republic. It's not because we want to stay there and to push in the Dominican government to run for some specific area. It's included a huge group of collaborators as OIRSA, as ICA, as many others. The World Organization of Animal Health is involved in some way, because for many people it's important, the presence of African swine fever in the Americas, with a potential risk of arrival for the continental area. So taking advance of the Sylvia's presence as a commander of the African swine fever response, it is important to let them clear that this is a collaboration. that could be extended for the full region. And I will appreciate if Sylvia will talk a little bit more about the process of negotiation and the intervention, because this is not a single decision for one person. It's an issue that involves a lot of people and a lot of authorities.
Okay. So yes, it's a very complicated issue and situation, and there are like different players, of course. And you know, it's kind of difficult to talk about everything, but you know, just in the context of what Dr. Castillo presented, and you know, how the threat, how we can see that is a potential, you know, that the disease is endemic, unfortunately, and we will be able to eradicate it, maybe not. You know, we are also in the process of evaluating the safety of a vaccine, an ASF vaccine, in the next month or so in the Dominican Republic. But you know what we are trying to really do, and with the help of our offices in Mexico and Senacic, etc., is to evaluate how vulnerable all these countries are for African swine fever, because the risk of virus escape exists. We are at the airports, and we have our dogs, and we are proud, you know, very good dogs do a very good job. We confiscate around between 400 and 1,000 kilos of porcine products every month. So that will go to the United States, destined to the United States, or to any OIRSA country. That's those are the countries that we are really concerned. So is possible for the virus to escape? Yes. You know, we know as a fact that our US government will also confiscate some more that comes from the Dominican Republic. So what we are trying to do is evaluate all these countries' vulnerability, and doing some network analysis on what this will represent to our main trading partners, including Mexico and Canada, and try to implement mitigation measures. And just building up on what Luis was saying, you know, this is a whole project. You know, we were like a few weeks ago trying to really understand the feral swine population in Mexico, and try to, maybe the risk of introduction in Mexico, for instance, is pretty low, but the risk of release within Mexico is extremely high. So all these factors, and I just wanted to close, you know, don't want to take your time, but I wanted to just tell you how difficult the situation is for us, because, you know, we are veterinarians. I never really understood how an incinerator works, you know, and I always thought like, okay, we buy an incinerator, 300,000, you know, available. But then, you know, it's the installation of the incinerator. What do you need to install the incinerator? You need water, you need a space. Who will go, what, how much does it cost to operate the incinerator? Who is going to pay for that? How many people you need? You have the regulations in place. So it's such a big issue to deal with. Every little thing, you know, she presented is a very complicated issue that requires discussing with the private company that deals with the airport, you know, from the space, who pays for this, who pays for the dogs, you know, veterinaries care and the food, and etc. So it's complicated. But you know, and all these many players. But you know, we do have some achievements that we can talk about. We have a lot of lessons that we have learned over the years, and we can figure it out the way to target our expectations, our mitigations in a way that we can all benefit. So that's it. I don't know if you want to.
We have one last question for the Dominican Republic. Before I move on, we've got three other questions in the chat. For Dr. Castillo, do you see any use of alternative samples to enhance, streamline, and reduce the costs associated with the ongoing ASF surveillance?
Yes, that's a very, very straightforward answer. Yes, because one of the main concerns that we have as a team is the sustainability of the program once APHIS pack their bags and go back, right? The government of the Dominican Republic at one point will have to pay for everything that APHIS is paying right now. So, for example, the amount that the cost of having 300 separate samples in 300 separate tubes is different when you compare that in one tube with MTM. We can do a pooled sample and have 5 animals in one single tube. So it not only reduced the amount of money that the cost itself of the test, it reduced también also the probability that the sample gets damaged, and at the end you spend all these resources and the sample when it arrives to the lab, it doesn't work, is damaged. And one of the things that we have been tackling right now is that even 2 years, 3 years almost of the diseases there, we still have to deal with constantly with the reminding the technicians in the field how to do their jobs almost in a daily basis. So every single thing that we can do to reduce the management, the manipulation of people, the manipulation of the animals, or the contamination of the test is money that we're saving. So yes, it is important. Yeah.
We have a question for the CFIA. If Kalari can turn her screen on. Maybe Aruna also could answer. It's a set of questions, actually. Can you expand on the sequencing methods used for detection of ASF when swine processing fluids were evaluated? Are they looking at whole genome sequencing or targeted specific regions of the genome, such as P72? And when pooling samples, what is the sensitivity of the method to still be able to detect the whole genome by sequencing? So 3 questions.
Aruna, if you're okay to answer, you can answer more clearly from there. Sorry, I don't know if I were not clear enough in the presentation. We didn't directly do whole genome sequencing or any type of sequencing from processing fluid samples. It was basically detecting the ASF genome in terms of real-time PCR. So it's P72 targeted using the SAC assay. So modified SAC assay. So at this point, we haven't attempted sequencing directly from sequencing ASF directly from processing fluid.
Maybe Aruna would like to add something.
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit. Yeah, so it was simple screening by P72 real-time PCR. That's what we have done on processing fluid. And we haven't done, I don't think, if I don't remember, Kalari, you can say that, we haven't attempted to isolate virus.
I did multiple times. So there is something I don't understand yet with processing fluids. It's incredibly difficult to isolate virus from it. It almost looks like it's toxic to the cells, to the primary cells. So we have not been successful in isolating the virus from processing fluid.
Yeah, so isolation has been challenging for processing fluid as well as from oral fluids. But what you need is a detection. So these are all screening assays. These are surveillance tools. What you need is a positive detection, and then you can target the farm, and then you can go and collect the samples for additional testing. So As surveillance tools, it serves the purpose. So it's real-time PCR detection.
Thanks. Thank you. And the last question we have from the chat, then we can go back to the room for Dr. Romero. Once validated the antigens, is there a plan to develop a commercial ELISA assay in Mexico or use them at the laboratories as an in-house test? Can we pass the microphone? Yes.
Ok, la pregunta dice, una vez que han validado los antígenos,
The
¿existen
question is, once you validated the antigens, is there a plan to have an ELISA test commercially available in Mexico? Or are you going to use that as an in-lab testing? Well, the idea is that with this new development, we would potentially provide this technology and transfer it to whatever is needed. I know so far, once it's validated by the two reference centers, we are establishing a collaboration with our national biological manufacturer in Mexico, whom potentially would provide these diagnostic systems for their use both inside Mexico as well as other countries if they request it. And the idea here is that this development is a low-cost development so that it can be for the benefit of other countries as well. The technology platform that we have has been adapted along that line to be able to have the antigen, and that we hope by next year we have a meeting about this issue and we have good news to share with you where our antigens have been validated by the two reference centers and can be applied in the implementation of these techniques both in Mexico and other countries as well. Thank you. Any other question here in the room? Go ahead. Questions here in the room? Thank you. Congratulations, doctor, for the work that you're doing. Very interesting. I hope that you're able to finish it very soon. I would like to ask a little bit about the technique, well, the selection of the P70 protein. It was just a fragment that you clone, or did you clone the entire thing? Well, yes, at the beginning we cloned the whole thing, but giving our expression system, it's too big. So here in Mexico, we only clone part of the original that we had. Okay, so then that drives me to my next question. In the case of the P70, we know that for it to have the form that is going to be used and uh, that is genetic, and that section has that trimetic formation. Did you include that in your section? Yes, yes, we are working with the model in itself, yes, to be able to sort of project the structure and have a good idea of its expression. The experience we had with some other proteins, the antigenicity has behaved the right way because we are doing tests in mice first to make sure that these proteins are antigenic. The confirmation, we are still working on that. You wanted to say something? Yes, yes. In our case, we selected the electrodomain of the proteins, which is the part of the proteins that have this function and capacity of being able to form secondary and tertiary structures. In the case of P72, we went past the presence of the antigenic presence, which the objective of our work is to detect the presence of antibodies present in the animal serum. And so for this, to confirm that these formations happen in a structural sense regarding secondary or tertiary structures and even fourth functions, structures, we are in the process of making that analysis, right? Such as naive conditions and other possible studies that might be able to help us identify their conditions. At the end, we had an internal design which was based on the experience of the production of other recombination antigens. But yes, we are, trying to make the decision and confirm if they're capable of forming other structures.
We don't have any more questions in the chat, so
No tenemos más preguntas.
having worked in the Caribbean for a couple of years now, biosecurity is quite low in most places, and it's a challenge. And we've had some success through swine fever to raise biosecurity in the region. And there's a lot of investments going on and benefits used through ASF to food safety at large. So there are rather multipliers here going on. And I wanted to hear from the room, given you all of your experience, we've got centuries of knowledge in this, just in this one room. I'm curious about any guidance that you could provide the Caribbean region on strengthening their biosecurity. Easy question.
I will add. We have, as you have seen, we have a very large population of backyard producers. There were around 13,000 backyard producers that have, I would say, no biosecurity. And we have like a pyramid that is like all these very, so many small producers with no biosecurity, and a few large producers, maybe around 100, that are the commercial farmers that have some biosecurity, follow some biosecurity standards in their farms. That said, through our cooperators, we have conducted evaluations of the biosecurity, and so far I will say like one met the specific FAO requirements, and 5 have the possibility of so many that they have evaluated, right? 5 could potentially meet the standards. The slaughterhouses are a big biosecurity issue that we really want to address, not just only because of African swine fever, but a public safety slaughterhouses all over the country will completely lack, do not follow any. We follow no biosecurity. It's a big problem. We are trying to address that, and because African swine fever is not really a public health issue, we are trying to address it more from a food security issue, and trying to use our resources to go into that. You need to have incentives for the producers, and you have to be sure that the incentives are going to be used in the way you are meant to be used, which is when you really have lack of enforcement is difficult to address as well. So it's a big problem, and we are trying to address little pieces of the very complicated puzzle.
I will add 2 things. The first one, it has to be with regulation and with the enforcement of regulation. When we were working with for the complete eradication of CFS, we passed a regulation. this regulation was quite good, actually. If that regulation was to be enforced, we will not be talking about ASF in the Dominican Republic at this moment. That regulation stated that you could not raise any pigs in backyard. You could not give as a food of source to pigs swill. This regulation also says that you could not have pigs around any landfill or any place where garbage was put for any place, right? However, we found farms of over 200 pigs in the landfills when we started with ASF. We also have found that even though the regulation says that you cannot give swill, obviously the majority of the people that raise in backyard and some semi-organized farms actually use swill. And we also find that is an industry, an economic industry, that people that actually purchase the swill from the hotels and stuff, and they sell it. They take a trunk and they bring in this trunk all these barrels and stuff, and they sell it. So that's a business. That's an economic problem right away, because it's a business that profits and it doesn't cost you anything, nothing. And the second thing that we have to address is the thing that biosecurity in a backyard is not an issue, because having a pig in your backyard is free. You can make a corral and you can have a place to put your pigs from things that you collect in the garbage. So it doesn't cost you anything to make a farm, make from scraps from anywhere. It's a very waste of money in the Dominican Republic that they make all these posters from the campaign for the senators and the deputies and all the presidential race. And then all those all those letters and all those billboards, you can find them in the backyards and stuff, and you can see a little piglet just scrapping himself against the face of the current president. So this is something that it doesn't cost anything to the backyard producers. So if you eliminate the farm, so he's going to, because there is not a regulation in place, something that it will punish him to do so, he will just go to the landfill and get another one, and he will get another pig, even if he gets the pig from his neighbor, from his compadre, from his the cousin of the cousin of the cousin, because everybody knows someone that sells pigs, even when right now repopulation is illegal, right? But we have illegal farms every day coming up. Like, where are these pigs coming from? Of course, they are coming from the commercial farms, but the commercial farm says, oh, we are following the directories, so we are not. But really? They are not black pigs. They are not coming from Haiti. They are white pigs, so you are selling them, but we cannot prove it. The other thing is that what we have thought about doing with the program with FAO, because we have seen that people, when they actually understand that either they work with us or they don't work at all, it's almost like forcing them, but it is necessary. And at this point, luckily for us, the government is putting some interest in the program. So we somehow could possibly in the future tie compensation to biosecurity. So if you are not in the program for improve the biosecurity of the farm and you get the disease, I don't give you a penny. As simple as that. But for that, a lot of conversation have to happen, because we have, for example, if we say, oh, we are not going to compensate any farm that follows these conditions, right? Or I'm not going to pay anyone that has been that repopulated illegally, right? Because I already pay you for your troubles. And then with the money that I pay you, because you have a lack of biosecurity, you went and you got more pigs, and now you have another farm with my money. So it's difficult, but as I see it, in my personal opinion, as Dominican and working for the people from the other side, and is that unless unless we actually force them to change and improve their biosecurity, we will not see the end of ASF. We will have like 300 years from now, and we will still be talking about ASF. Without biosecurity, without teaching the people, without actually explaining to them what's going on and why they cannot do this or that, we will not go anywhere. That's why we are let's say, we are betting on education right now to try and make the people understand where do we come from and where do might get if we continue like we are right now.
In one of your slides
Yeah.
from 40 years ago, one of the main solutions you had put was an educational campaign of the rural populations as one of the main solutions to eradicating ASF.
Yes.
I know, Dr. Crandall, you'd like to add a.
Say like one more thing regarding biosecurity.
1 minute then, please.
And Shusaira mentioned how the disease is moving, based on the sequencing, and that's the movement and the lack of cleaning of the transportation, and also the lack of movement controls. I mean, everything is related to biosecurity and many other components, but that's evident. The evidence is the sequencing, how these trucks are moving the animals, lack of biosecurity,
Right.
cleaning and disinfecting.
Yeah, that's good. A good addition. Thanks for that. So that ends this morning's session. I'd like to thank everyone online for their presentations. Well done, very informative, and I'm sure this discussion will continue in the afternoon, and Dr. Susana, my colleague here, will do the wrap-up session at 3:30. So for those online, we will come back to the room here in Mexico City local time at 1 o'clock, which is about 3 Eastern. We'll break for lunch in the hotel's Tres Patio, and we'll see you in 90 minutes. Thanks, everybody.